very happy, very honored, very grateful to be with all of you again in this very beautiful abode of the Anand Prakash Ashram. Special gratitude to Chaitanya, Parvati, Vishwaketuji, and all of you. I was here day before yesterday, and somehow or other, out of your generosity, magnanimity, and kindness, you let me come back. Thank you. Special gratitude to Uma also for being so playful. How many of you were here the day before yesterday? Please raise your hand. And how many were not here day before yesterday? So I will not repeat what I spoke. At least not too much. I was asked to speak on this book that I had written entitled The Journey Home. A book I never wanted to write, but one of my very dearest friends, he made me promise him on his deathbed that I would write it. So in his honor, His Holiness Bhakti Tirtha Swami, the book has been written. I was born in downtown Chicago in the United States in 1950. I grew up as a teenager in the 1960s, a very turbulent time, when many of us were really questioning everything in life, because so many things didn't make sense. There was a war. There was so much religious and racial prejudice all around. All in the name of freedom. Didn't make sense. So I demonstrated, I read books, but ultimately came to the realization that if we don't change what's within our heart, whatever change we try to create in the world is all external and superficial. I read the words of Gandhi, "Be the change you want to see in the world." And I believe it was Martin Luther King who said, "If you do not have an ideal you are willing to die for, you have nothing meaningful to live for." I wanted to find that ideal. And as time went on, it became very clear to me that the foundation of our life has to be something very deep and spiritual in order to have a fulfilling and meaningful life. So I hitchhiked from London to Hrishikesh. In fact, I was living around Tapovan for some time. This ashram, unfortunately, was not here at that time. I arrived in Hrishikesh in 1970. I was living in a cave across the Ganga in the jungle. And I sat on a rock from sunrise to sunset every day, meditating and praying. Eventually, I lived with Swami Chidananda Saraswati of the Shivananda Mission. Tatwala Baba, who was a cave yogi across the river, and Maharishi Mahesh Yogi up in his mountain when he was still there. Then I wanted to go higher into the Himalayas. And I remember I crossed Lakshman-Julan Bridge to this side, started walking north, all alone. Suddenly I came to a clearing. It was a great culture shock for me. I saw in that clearing the most miserable people I've ever seen in my life. They were in rags. Some of them didn't even have rags. It was the end of the winter, so it was still very cold. None of them had a single little house or even roof to sleep on. They just slept on the dirt. There was probably 100 people there. And some of them, to save themselves from the cold, they somehow or other dug a hole in the ground and laid in the hole and covered themselves with dirt. But then I looked a little closer. Most of them, their faces were totally deformed. Their skin seemed to be decomposing. Many of them had no noses. There was just holes in their face. And they didn't have fingers or toes. I happened to stumble into a leprosy colony. Suddenly, about a dozen of them, seeing me, they somehow or other rushed toward me and made a tight circle around me. Their eyes were so intensely desperate. And they wouldn't let me go. They were squeezing tighter and tighter and tighter. And they were fighting with each other to get their hand closer to me to get the first donation. But the problem is I had no money. All I had was these sadhu robes that somebody gave me. And that was it. I had nothing. I wanted to give them something, but I had nothing to give. They were screaming and screaming and screaming and getting angrier and angrier and angrier. And I didn't know much about leprosy, but I used to see about it in the movies. And usually lepers were kept in caves on some deserted island because it was contagious. And I was wondering if I was going to get leprosy too. They were touching me, there was blood getting on me, there was saliva getting on me. It was a culture shock. And I was alone. They kept me like that for about 20 minutes. Half of my mind was thinking, why are these people doing this to me? What did I do? And the other half of my mind was thinking that these people are totally discarded, rejected, and deserted from the whole world. They have nothing. They have every right to do anything they want to survive. I was just coming out of my teenage years at the time. Just turned 20. Finally, they searched me thoroughly. Several of them. They patted every part of my body to see if I had any money. If I did, they would have taken it. But when they saw I had nothing, they dispersed. And there was a sigh of relief as I took just a few steps. But then on my left side, I saw something that caused me to stop in my tracks. It was a very, very old leper woman. She was laying on her left side. half of her hair, half of her head was kind of bald and the other was white hair. She had no nose. Her face was deformed and shriveled with disease and no fingers. She looked at me, stared right in my eyes, and I looked back at her. I saw in her eyes the love of a mother. She looked at me with such pity, because she knew what I just had undergone from her people. And it was as she was looking at me, begging forgiveness from what her people had just done to me. And then she offered her pranams, and then put her hand out to offer me a blessing. A mother blessing a child. I was so overwhelmed by affection for this lady that I ran over to her, got down on my knees, and bowed my head so that she could put her hand on top of it to bless me. And as my head was down and her hand was on top, in the Hindi language she repeatedly spoke, "May God bless you, my child. May God bless you, my child. May God bless you, my child." I looked up. As I looked up, I saw a gigantic smile on her face. She had no teeth, but what a beautiful smile. Her face was lit with joy. The joy of giving. And from her eyes, tears were streaming. This may sound difficult for you to understand, but it's true. As I was looking at this deformed leper woman, I was thinking, she's the most beautiful person I've ever seen. She accepted me like a mother to a child, unconditional, not wanting anything from me. I saw in her face somebody who wanted to give a mother's love to someone for probably years and years and never had the chance to give it. And I was giving her that chance to give a mother's blessing to someone. And she was so grateful. She was so joyful. That's all she wanted. After I parted from her, I went up a little and came down to the bank of the Ganga. And I was looking at the ripples and the swirls of the waves. A little fish jumped up. And I was feeling, this is so beautiful. I was thinking, what is God trying to teach me by making that fish jump up? And actually, if our hearts and minds are open to hear a message from the Lord, there's always a message for us to grow and to live and to gain wisdom with. It's just a matter of our receptivity. And I was thinking, how many millions and millions and millions of fish of all different colors and all different sizes are there underneath the surface of the Ganga? I only saw that one because it came up to the surface. I was thinking how many beautiful rocks and stones and how many vegetations and weeds and beautiful things are happening underwater. But all I'm able to see is what's on the surface. And isn't that the way life is? We see so much what's on the surface, but we're not able to perceive the incredible variegatedness and depths beneath the surface. Martin Luther King said he had a dream when instead of people seeing for his children on the basis of the color of their skin, they would see the content of their character. There is that saying, beauty is only skin deep. But actually, real beauty is something so much deeper than the skin. It's the heart. It's the character. I was thinking of people who tried to murder me when I was traveling through Turkey. People who tried to murder me when I was traveling through Afghanistan. I was thinking of people when I was a child who hated me because of a minority religion that I was born into. And now, this is all just superficial things. If we go deeper into why people are mean or why people are insecure, we'll usually find traumas and tragedies and victimizations that they've gone through that made them like that. And instead of hating them, we'll probably feel compassion for them. It is said we should hate the disease, but we should not hate the diseased. If my brother has a sickness, I hate the sickness, but I love my brother. Aham bija prata pita. It's a universal principle that God is the father and mother of every living being. That means we're all brothers and sisters. If only we could just see below the surface of a person's physical, emotional, and mental state. And as I was looking into that current of Ganga, I was thinking, just a few minutes before, that leper woman, the ugliest body I'd ever seen, but the most beautiful person. She was one of my gurus. She taught me so much. Who am I? Who are all of you? Who is God? This is a deep subject. And so often, even in the name of religion, we become so attached to the external, superficial things and never really go deep into the essence of it. And instead of creating unity, it creates division. Instead of creating love, it creates hate. Instead of seeing people with equal vision, we see people according to my own egoistic conceptions. Sarugrahi, to seek the essence. I didn't know that word then. But as I was sitting on the bank of the Ganges, I understood that lesson. It was a crucial experience for me to undergo, to carry on with my journey. In search of truth, in search of myself, in search of love. I traveled higher into the Himalayas to Uttarkashi. First I was in Dev-Prayag, and then I came to Dehradun, where I lived with Anand, and then I went up to Uttarkashi. And there I found a very, very nice cave. They have wonderful caves up there, if any of you would like to experience that type of life. And there I studied animals, because there were no people around. And sometimes I was thinking, I was kind of scared to be living with scorpions would come in my cave sometime. I realized this is their home. I'm a visitor. Why do I have an ego to think that I'm better than them? I was asking these questions. They could kill me. Many of these, I can't kill them, but they could kill me. They're in a superior position. But one thing that I have a gift of as a human being is the power to question. Why is there suffering? Who am I? Who is God? What is the true purpose of life? And I realized in that cave that that's the real strength of being a human being. Not making bombs, not creating science and technology. These things could be good. But actually, the animals have their technology, better than ours in certain ways. It's like oftentimes America invents things, and then the Japanese, they learn how to take that and put it into tiniest little sizes and make it work even better. Well, we create airplanes, wonderful airplanes. And they have radar controls and all sorts of GPS, whatever, for navigation. But as I was thinking, in that cave, a little mosquito would land. I remember a little mosquito landed on me. And usually when you see a mosquito, you just think, oh, it may have malaria in India, or it may bite me. But I was in a very receptive state of mind. I was thinking, what am I supposed to learn from this mosquito? Oh, oceans we could learn. What is the technology of that mosquito? Mosquito doesn't know about it so much, but that God-given technology could fly. God put an airplane this big. Yes. And he doesn't need radar controls. I started a little fire, and there were so many mosquitoes flying around the fire. I remember when I was a little boy, I used to look up at the street lamp, and there would be thousands and thousands and thousands of mosquitoes swirling around. You've all seen that? Have you ever seen two mosquitoes crash? Yes. We need to spend millions of dollars to make all these towers and radars and air traffic control, and then the air traffic controllers go on strike, and then the airlines can't fly anymore. And if they don't fly, then the airlines will crash. Yes? But mosquitoes, there's millions of them, within a few meters. And they're flying and swarming and flying and swimming, and they never crash. And they don't need a runway to take off. And they don't need a runway to land. If they did, it would make it much easier for us. We would know they're coming before they bite us. They'd have to go. They just land in a second. They have your blood and they're gone. What an incredible machine. What technology. What an incredible lesson. So as far as the science of aerodynamics, we cannot compete with the mosquito. What to speak of the birds and the flies. If a human could do that, we would be considered great yogis. If we could fly like a mosquito. And the strength of a lion. Samson fought a lion and won. But we don't read about anybody else who can fight lions and win. Even the heavyweight champion boxers and wrestlers of the world. put him in a ring with a lion. Finished. So animals could fly better than us. Many animals can fight better than us. I've seen some beautiful acrobat humans, but they can't do what these typical monkeys do that we see. Yes, they're incredible what they can do. They can lump, they can jump. So many tricks. We don't even notice it. But there is something very special I remember in Uttarkashi when I was meditating and contemplating. That humans can access that spiritual love, that spiritual compassion, that spiritual wisdom that is within our hearts through sincerely taking to a spiritual process. That's the most valuable gift we have. That's what really separates us from all other species. But at the same time, that's what really unites us with all other species. Bhagavad Gita tells Vidyavanaya Sampani Brahmani Kavi Hastivi Suni Chaiva Supakecha Pandita Samadarsha. Real wisdom is to see every living being with equal vision. Because we see the sacredness of life, a part of God in everyone. Whether one is male or female, black, white, red, yellow, brown, east or west, educated or uneducated, Hindu, Muslim, Christian, Jew, Sikh, Parsi, Jain, agnostic, atheist, rich or poor. And the Bhagavad Gita extends that principle. To see with equal vision a human, an elephant, a cow, a dog, a cat. Amaivam so jiva loke, because every living being is part of God. The Atma. Najayate mriyate vata kadachya. That the Atma, the soul, the living force within us is eternal. It is never born and never dies. It's Satchidananda, eternal, full of knowledge, full of bliss. That's who we are. And that's who everyone is. Wherever there's life is the presence of that Atma, that soul. To realize that within ourselves, we're able to perceive that essence within everyone. The universal brotherhood and sisterhood, not only of humanity, but of all species. Higher civilization is not about how high and beautiful our government buildings are. Higher civilization, from a yoga perspective, from a religious, actual, spiritual perspective, is to the extent that inner propensity to love is unselfishly extended to all living beings. That is actually advancement in human civilization. And these were some of the lessons I was learning. I never learned them in school from PhD professors. But I was learning them from mosquitoes, and from cobras, and from monkeys, and from a leopard. Ultimately, I believed so strongly, it was God. I didn't know who he was at the time, but I knew he was there. She was there. I knew that the Lord was there. And I knew if I opened my heart, the Lord would reveal inner secrets of my own heart. It's actually quite amazing. The deepest, most profound secrets of the universe are concealed within each of our hearts. Krishna tells in Gita that this is the king of knowledge and the most secret of all secrets. Why is it such a secret? It's forever our nature to know these things. But we have forgotten. Constantly bombarded by weapons of mass distraction. We have forgotten who we are, what is within us, the beauty of life. And it's actually being revealed everywhere. If we just hear. In the Bible, I believe Jesus said, those who have ears should hear. What does that mean? Everybody's hearing, but do we really hear? Everyone's seeing, but do we really see? I met some yogis who were blind in the Himalayas and in Vrindavan. They were blind, but I realized by hearing from them and by seeing the character of their life that they were seeing infinitely more than I was with my eyes. They were seeing the beauty of their own soul. Even without eyes, they were seeing with their hearts the beauty of everyone else's soul. They were seeing God. Sometimes we're distracted so much by what the eyes see and the ears hear and the flesh feels that we don't really take the time to understand the inner vision, the inner feeling, the inner sound that liberates us. And the blessing of these eyes and ears and the tongue is we can actually connect with those inner secrets by seeing through the eyes of the scripture and the saintly people, by hearing their words, by tasting the sweetness of these mantras and the names of God. From Uttarkashi I started going up to Badrinath, but because it was winter, the roads were closed with snow. So I came back down to Hrishikesh. There's many stories of what happened, but we don't have so much time. At one point I traveled down to Varanasi and Gaya and Bodh Gaya. And I remember, because I used to go on these third-class trains, which were, from a technical perspective, you weren't allowed in unless you bought a ticket. But from a practical perspective, they were so crowded with people that no sane ticket collector would even dare to try to get inside. There were hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people in a single car. There was probably double the times of people sitting on each seat and triple the times of people who were standing up. And even in the baggage racks, people were crunched up there. And I learned that the baggage racks were actually the most comfortable place to be. But they were rare to get. But the train stopped in Agra. So I was thinking, who comes to India without seeing the Taj Mahal? So I could get off the train and then get on any other train I want by jumping through a window and riding for free. And I remember the lesson I learned from seeing the Taj Mahal. Would you like to hear? It's a beautiful building of fine white marble. It's not so white anymore because of all the pollution from Delhi and all these other places. And there's a refinery, an industrial refinery in Mathura, just close. But in those days, it was very white marble. And then I was reading about it. Someone gave me a little pamphlet about the history of the Taj Mahal. And what a different perspective I got. There was a king. His name was Shah Jahan, a Mughal king. And his wife, Mumtaz, I believe her name was, she gave him so many children. And then she died. And in honor of her and the children she gave him, he built the Taj Mahal as a tomb for her, with tens and thousands of workers. Because in those days, if you're a king, you just tell people what to do and they do it. There were no labor unions or anything like that, which are good. But then it talked about how one of his younger sons, Aurangzeb, wanted to take the throne, so he killed his elder brothers. He imprisoned some of the other elder brothers. And then he captured his father and put him in prison. And I was thinking, he built this incredible monument. It's one of the 7 wonders of the world. And when he was in prison, he wasn't even allowed to see it. Well, it really was the fulfillment and satisfaction of building this place. He honored his wife for giving him children, and the children were killing each other and abducting and imprisoning the father. If there's anything, that man must have suffered so bad. I'm a Swami, so I never had children. But I meet a lot of parents, and they tell me their problems. Well, one of the greatest problems is when a parent who loves their children see that their children hate each other. And I was thinking, what is really meaningful in life? To overcome greed, to overcome hate, to overcome the thirst for power, to actually learn how to love and be compassionate, that is monumental. I learned so much just by looking up at the Taj Mahal. I went to Varanasi, where I was staying at the Kashi Vishwanath, and I was praying to Lord Shiva, please show me my path. Please show me my guru. Please show me how I could reach you. Because I was living with yogis of different schools, I was living with Buddhists, I was living with Hindu saints, and in the West, I was studying at Christian monasteries and synagogues. Which is my path? I believed very deeply and sincerely in the oneness of the essence of all the great spiritual paths. But I understood I had to follow one. But I just couldn't understand. And I was praying to Shiva at Vishwanath on the banks of the river Ganga in Varanasi, please show me the way. It's a long story, but eventually I came to a city in Bihar called Patna. Have any of you ever been to Patna? You've been everywhere. My very old and dear friend. So happy you're here. I was living on the bank of the Ganga in a place called Collectory Ghat. This is another Ganga story. The first day I arrived there, because I would always sleep on riverbanks. Whenever I would get to a place, I would ask, where is the river? And sleep on the bank of the river. And if there was no river, I would go find a nice tree and sleep under the tree. But on the bank of the Ganga, it was very wide. hundreds and hundreds of people at this ghat doing all sorts of pujas and singing kirtans and chanting mantras and doing all different types of rituals. It was really a festival. In those days, this was 1971. This is the way the day started every day. There were people playing musical instruments, shanais and sitars, and they were taking their baths, and they were taking their cows and their buffaloes to take baths, and they were singing songs, and they were doing pujas, and they were offering flowers and lamps to the Mother Ganga. It was really beautiful. And I looked up and standing right over me was this very ancient-looking holy man with a long white beard and white hair and saffron clothes. He looked down at me. I was laying down, just looking around. He didn't speak English, but he invited me into his little temple. It was an old stone temple that just had 2 walls, and 2 sides were open, so that the Ganga was in full view on both sides. There was no wall at all. And there were deities of Sita, Ram, Lakshman, Hanuman, very ancient in the temple. And he invited me to stay with him. His name was Radhanath-Swami-Media. He called one of his disciples. Radhanath-Swami was about 85 years old. I was 20 at the time. So he was older than my grandfather. But he treated me like a brother. It was actually very sweet. And one of his disciples, who was over 80 years old, Narayan Prasad, he spoke English. Translate for me. And Radhanath-Swami, he was a devotee of Ram. He followed bhakti yoga. He was the first bhakti yogi I met. I remember he told me his name, Radhanath-Swami, meant, sevak means one who serves. So it means I'm the servant of Ram. And the greatest service that pleases Ram is to serve those who Ram loves. And Ram loves everybody. So he was with tears in his eyes, rolling down his beard, in folded palms, this tall, saintly, elderly saint. He was thanking me for coming to his temple so that he could serve me. That's how he could best serve Ram. So it was hard to leave. His hospitality was incredible. He didn't have anything, but his hospitality was incredible. And I remember, I'm going to tell a couple stories from, would you like to hear about this? I'll tell a couple stories about while I was living there before he lived alone, and I was with him. We slept on there was no beds. Everything was stone, big stones. So we just slept on a stone floor. And every now and then other old sadhus who were traveling around would come and stay with him. So at one time it was Radhanath-Swami and this old sadhu who only wore a kopan. Didn't wear any other clothes, but just a loincloth. And they went to sleep, and that night, swarms of gigantic, hungry, thirsty mosquitoes attacked. And they were swarming around. Even if they didn't bite, just the sound of their buzzing would keep you up. But they were biting. Every one of them was hungry. They were biting. And I was laying there, and all I had was a little chadar like this and a little lungi like this. So I'd cover myself. They would just those little needles in their faces would just pierce right through my cloth. And they were biting and biting and biting, and after they'd biting, it was itching intensely, and they were just all around going bzzz. There was no possibility of sleep. But then I looked at Ram Sevak Swami and this other sadhu. And as they were laying down, there were as many mosquitoes biting them as me. I was watching these giant mosquitoes. It's just, and I'd see them fill up and get fat with blood and then fly away, and then another one. I'll try to do it more accurately. It's like, and they were getting dozens and dozens of bites. And they were sleeping more peaceful than any person in America or Europe who takes 10 sleeping pills. They were absolutely peacefully sleeping, and they didn't take any sleeping pills. They didn't even smoke ganja or hashish or any of that stuff. They were real yogis. They were just sleeping. And meanwhile, I was just looking at them. And I didn't want to kill the mosquitoes because I was taught yogis don't kill. So I was thinking, when will that day be mine when I could be like them? That was my thoughts in those days. Where they could be happy in any situation. The Bhagavad Gita tells this beautiful verse, one who finds pleasure within, who rejoices within, could be happy in any situation of life, whatever happens in this external world of uncertainties. One day, this other sadhu, he had long matted hair that he kept like in coils on top of his head so he didn't trip over his hair because it was that long. And he decided to cook for Ram Sevak Swami and myself. So he went out to beg, because the only thing we ate was what we begged for. But it's amazing, when you beg with these great saints, when you go to beg from somebody, they actually, some people just say, hello, get out of here. But other people, they feel that God has come to bless them by giving them a chance to serve, to do seva. So this old sadhu, he was probably in his 60s. He decided to make khichdi, rice with dal with a few potatoes in it. And he got some those cow dung patties, broke it, started a fire, and was cooking with dried cow dung. Just on the floor, he made a little stove out of some rocks and balanced a pot on some rocks and put the cow dung under it in the fire. And he cooked it and he cooked it, and I smelled it. It was burning, but that was detail. And then he came to serve it out. And when other sadhus found out, I think 3 more came because they heard that this person was cooking. So we all sat down together. It was the only meal I had every day, so I was really hungry. I remember my first bite. It was excruciating, unbearable, inconceivable. I think for every grain of rice, there was 3 chili peppers. That's what it tasted like. I might be literally exaggerating, but the experience was like that. It was so hot. And he put this huge ladle of a pile of this khichdi on my plate. It was a leaf plate. And I was living with sadhus. Those were the only people I lived with when I was in I was a hermit in seclusion. Otherwise, I was just traveling with sadhus. And sadhus never, when they eat with other sadhus, they never leave anything on the plate. They have to eat everything. And these people are 85, 80s, 60s, and I'm 20, and they're eating. And I took that first bite, and I looked at the rest of it. I remember thinking, it would be easier to climb Mount Everest than to eat all this catering. Bite after bite, I was suffering. I realized how much I'm still identifying with this body. My tongue was burning. It was so hot, literally. Tears were streaming from my eyes. I was perspiring profusely. I was just sweating and sweating and sweating. It was so hot that I actually thought I was feeling the wax in my ears melting and going down into my body. Oh, my goal in life. My goal in life before that meal was, to realize God and to realize myself. But at that moment, my goal in life was to finish this plate of khichdi. And, the thing is water. When you eat chilies like that, water is like gasoline or petrol on fire. It only increases it. So I couldn't even take water. So finally, I was just beaten down a week trying to eat it and eat it. And I saw these other sadhus, they were enjoying it like anything. They were eating the same thing as me. Should I finish this story? So finally I finished. And the cook came back with the pot and the ladle to give me seconds. And I put my hand over the plate and I said, no, but he didn't understand English. And he said, tora, which means little. I said, nay, and he said, tora. I said, nay. He said, tora. I said, nay. And then I said, puran, because sadhus, when they have enough, they say, puran. That means I'm full. I'm so full, I can't take any more. I said, puran. And he said, tora. I said, puran. Puran. Please, puran. No. Tora. And then he dropped the full ladle of khichdi on my plate. And all the other sadhus were just eating and eating. They were getting seconds and thirds and fourths. And I suffered through. And finally I finished it. And he came back with the ladle. Tora. And I prayed to God. I really prayed. Please save me. And he did. You know how he did? He gave me the intelligence. Something I never did before. He gave me the intelligence to take my leaf plate and scrumple it up into a little ball and keep it in my hand so that he couldn't put any more khichdi down. So when I did that, he just smiled, and then he served all the others more and more and more and more. And as he was serving them more, and they were blissfully eating the khichdi, I could understand what he was saying. He said to the other sadhus, look at this young boy. He likes my cooking so much he's weeping in ecstasy. And I went like this, yeah. Might as well make him feel good about it, And he was so happy that he thought I loved it so much. I got a burning lesson that day. That it's not always so easy to please people. But to please great souls may not always be easy. But it's a very, very precious experience. Every day at that little stone temple, about 6 or 6 old sadhus would gather to discuss the Ramayana, the Leelas of Ram. Because they were all Ram Bhaktas. They were all Bhakti yogis who worshipped Ram. They would speak, they would read and discuss these subjects for about 3 hours every day. And how they were relishing the subject. I was enthralled just by watching them. They would be reading with such force, with such enthusiasm. Sometimes they would be weeping. Sometimes they would be rolling on the floor laughing. Sometimes they looked like they were in such total suspense that something was about to happen. And I was yearning to find out, what is the story? I've never seen human beings being emotionally and spiritually affected by a story. I asked Narayan Prasad, please take notes. And after, because they were speaking in Hindi, I couldn't understand it. But I was just seeing their emotions and the reactions. So afterward, I sat on the bank of Gangamai and asked Narayan Prasad, tell me everything that was spoken. He said, I will tell you everything. He said, I want to know those sad parts where everyone was crying and those funny parts where everyone was laughing and roaring, and I want to hear the suspenseful, tragic parts where people's hairs were standing on end. I want to hear everything. He said, I will tell you everything. And he began with a story. When Krishna was a little baby, his name was Gopal. And how Krishna is the absolute truth, Parabrahman, the supreme Lord of all lords. Ishvara Sarva, Ishvara Parama Krishna Satchidananda Vigraha, Anadiradir Govinda Sarva Karuna Karanam. The scripture tells that Krishna's body is not Maya. Krishna's body is eternal, full of knowledge, full of bliss. The source of the all-pervading Brahman. He's the cause of all causes and the ultimate goal of life. But yet he takes the form and the role of a little baby just to attract our love by his sweetness. Some people love God as the almighty creator of all existence. But he taught me that this mother, Yashoda, just a simple lady, she loved that same Lord as her own baby child. She would feed him milk from her breast. It wasn't just milk, it was the milk of her intense, pure love. Prema. In bhakti, the highest perfection of bhakti is prema, ecstatic love. And Krishna would be hungry for her prema, and he would drink her milk. And she would always be worried about Krishna because he was a little baby, just like a mother is for a child. But the difference is her love was in the perfect liberated state. It was unlimited because the object of her love was unlimited. So Krishna, when he just learned how to walk, he would go to other gopis or other cowherd ladies' houses and steal their butter. And they would come and complain to Yashoda that your Gopal is stealing our butter. And Yashoda would say, oh, then I will make sure he doesn't go out. They'd say, no. The only reason we make our butter is with the hope that he will come to steal it. That's the perfection of everything we do, is that Gopal enjoys what we're doing. So one day, Yashoda Mai, early in the morning, this is what Narayan Prasad was telling me, that Yashoda Mai was churning butter from yogurt. milk started flowing out of motherly love. So Gopal, who was sleeping, he understood, and he became hungry for that milk of her love. And he ran up to her and said, "Please feed me." So she stopped churning, and she fed Krishna her milk. But in the kitchen, just close by, she had a pot of milk on the stove that was boiling over, so she brought little Gopal down to take the pot off the stove. While she was gone, Gopal took a piece of stone and broke the butter pot and started eating it. And then he went to another room and saw a wooden grinding mortar, and he climbed on top of that where there was butter hanging from some ropes in a clay pot, and he started eating that. And then he called the monkeys of Vrindavan. And all these dozens of monkeys came jumping through the windows. It was actually like a courtyard. They all came, and Krishna was personally feeding each of them butter. One great acharya explained that in Krishna's previous incarnation he was Ram, and while he was in exile, Hanuman and this whole tribe of monkeys, they helped Ram to rescue Sita and to battle against Ravana. And Ram had nothing to give them because he was in exile. So Krishna was thinking, let me pay all you back by giving you some butter now. So come all monkeys. And he was just giving butter, little tiny boy. And they were eating and eating. And meanwhile, Yashoda Mai comes and she sees the butter pot's broken. Where's Gopal? What happened? Who broke this? He must have freaked it. And then she saw little butter footprints. And she started following those footprints like a detective. And she had a little stick in her hand. Not to hit him, just to make him a little, to take it serious by showing it to him. And when she came in the room, Krishna was feeding monkeys and there was butter all over his face. And the monkeys saw Yashoda and they started jumping all over and running away. And Krishna turned around and he saw his mother and he jumped off the grinding mortar and started running, and his mother ran after him, and he ran and she ran and he ran and she ran. And ultimately she caught him. According to the Upanishads, the Supreme Brahman, the Absolute Truth, is faster than the fastest. He cannot be caught even by the speed of mind. But that same Absolute Truth was willing to be captured by the love of his devotee. And she had other work to do. So after Krishna was crying and saying, please put down that stick. So she threw the stick away. Krishna said, I won't do it anymore, I promise. She said, you are so naughty. Because you associate so much with these monkeys, you have become like a monkey. Can you imagine saying that to God? There's a beautiful scripture by Radhanath-Swami-Media where he says that the Supreme Lord, he relishes even more than hearing the greatest sages and Brahmins praising him, his intimate devotees chastising him, the residents of Vrindavan. So Yashoda Mai said, I have many chores to do, and you're so mischievous today, I'm going to tie you up so that you can't get in any mischief. So she took a very soft silk rope that's used actually for calves to keep them from getting hurt. And she went to bind it around his waist to tie him to this grinding mortar. When she put it around his little tiny waist, it was the length of 2 fingers too short. And she went to get more rope and tied that to the original rope around his waist. It was 2 fingers too short. She got more rope and tied that to the original. And his waist was not growing. His waist was always this big. And the ropes was getting this big, this big, this big, this big. It was getting 10 meters, 20 meters, 30 meters, 50 meters. And every time she put it around his little waist, it was always exactly 2 fingers too short. The Lord, Achinta Shakti, this is one of the Parabrahman, has inconceivable potencies. So other neighboring Gopi ladies came and they started bringing all the ropes from their house. And all these ropes, it was all different colors. It was a festival of ropes, and there was this incredible quantities of ropes being tied to each other. But every time was the same 2 fingers too small. And one of the gopis said to Yashoda, that don't you see, it's not Gopal's destiny to be tied up today. And Yashodamai said, I have to protect him from getting hurt. I have to do it. And besides that, I'm not going to give up because I want to see how much rope it takes to go around my baby's waist. So the flowers that were in her hair were coming off, and she was perspiring, and her sari was getting loosened, and she was doing a lot of work. And finally Gopal was thinking, I must show the world how I'm defeated by the love of my devotee. And she put the next rope around him and tied it. Hari Hari. And Narayan Prasad was telling me this beautiful story and said the lesson of this story is the greatness of bhakti. The supreme controller of all controllers finds the greatest pleasure in being controlled by the love of a devotee. The absolute truth, who was Abhigya and Swarat, was absolutely independent and free and all-pervading. That same supreme truth finds the greatest pleasure being conquered by the love of a devotee. Don't we all have that quality in minute proportion? Is there any greater feeling than being totally conquered by love? The origin of that is in the origin of everything. So he told me that beautiful story, that this is the most secret of all secrets of the Ramayana and the great Vedas, how the Lord is conquered by the love of the devotee. I said, well, what else? He said, that's all we talked about today. I said, you spoke for 3 hours. This only took 5 minutes. He said, that is all we spoke about. I said, nothing else? He said, nothing else. What could I say? He's 80 and I'm 20. So next day, they're laughing, they're crying, they're in suspense, they're howling. What an incredible story. I'm just watching thinking, I have to hear what